and lead behavioral analysis at the Behavioral Research Group. Now that is a tongue twister right there. Say that about 10 times. His behavioral consultation involves personality differences, leadership strategy, and cultural differences, spiritual growth, and temperament strategies. He has been working with clients in more than 18 nations, and Steve has gathered behavioral and information on individuals within corporations and personal, and he's developed this really unique strategy to kind of identify who you are. I did this behavioral analysis with Steve maybe 3-4 months ago, and truthfully, Steve, I'm just going to tell you right away, I think you saved me about a decade of headaches. Small things that you pointed out about my personality, about who I am and what I need to do. It was like, my God, like, did you take a scalpel and open up my mind? Like, who are you, man? How do you know so much about me? And that's why I'm so excited to have you on the show today to really educate all the warriors out there about the benefits of going through a behavioral analysis. So, Steve, welcome to the show, my friend. How you been?
Thanks. I'm good. It's really an honor to be on your show. And I hope I can, shed some light on kind of our human condition and what all that means, and then how we can maybe capitalize on it.
Well, let's first begin with, like, what in the world is this behavioral analysis profiling?
It's something that's been around for a very long time. It started in ancient Greece, really, by the Greek physician Hippocrates, who noticed different temperament styles in people based upon basically where they lived. For example, people that lived in the high mountainous regions were vicious warriors and really undefeatable. And through research and so forth, he discovered that because the terrain they lived in was so unpredictable, they were survivors. So the people that lived in the low-lying meadows were like the modern-day couch potatoes. They just had no issues with weather or sudden changes in weather. And basically that environment created a style of acting or behaving. Although they believed it came from the body fluids, bile, phlegm, blood, whatever, that's of course more mysticism and is proven untrue. But beginning with Hippocrates and moving forward, so many different people, I'd spend the whole time naming them, but there are different assessments out there that can tap into these behaviors and these frameworks, which are based upon different emotions, and then measure it. And so once we know where the intensities lie in the 4 emotions, let's say mad, glad, sad, scared, then we can predict exactly how you'll act in any given situation, who you'll get along with or whatever. And so we also work with the 7 attitudes or drivers, which move us forward. And when you take that package and put it together, I could look at a person and in a few minutes know exactly what their insecurities are or whatever, because the data doesn't lie, and the mannerisms, the behaviors that come out of who we are tell a story. And that's pretty much what we do, because we want to help inform people. Is this the right fit for you? Is this the right job for you? Is this the right partner? What are you going to run into in the future? And it's very, very helpful and reliable.
Now, I know there's different other types of testing out there. For example, before the podcast, you and I were talking about there's the Myers-Briggs test, there's the Colby testing. So what's the difference between the behavioral analysis and these other tests?
Well, the Myers-Briggs, has 16 different types, and I think they've been broken down like artisan, guardian, idealist, rational, the Kersey temperament sorter. There's axiology, which I work with. There's all these different things, but we're all getting the same information in a different way. A lot of the reasons why there's so many different assessments out there are because it's a business. And we want to identify with something that's different or a different name. People are using animals now. Whatever, they'll do anything, and then they'll create an instrument, put together an algorithm, and measure people, and then make a business out of it. What I do is I typically stick with the most basic, simplest one, because no matter how simple or how difficult, we're getting the same information. Once I get that information, and I can get it in 36 questions, once I got it, then I don't use the assessment. I just use it to get the numbers. And once I have those numbers, it's almost like numerology. Once I have the numbers, I know what those numbers are going to mean in relationship to your behavior.
But let's talk about getting those numbers. So what's a process? For example, I've gone through this, I already know it, but what's a process? Or let's kind of rewind. How did you actually come to a point of knowing what types of questions to ask the people to kind of draw that information out?
Well, this is something that's been developed over the years. The disc, for instance, began with like Edward Spranger, who put together an instrument, and Carl Jung, and all these different sociologists, psychiatrists, Moulton Marston, put these algorithms together. They got mathematicians. I have a good friend that's a mathematician. We're working on an assessment right now. It's thousands and thousands of points of data from different instruments. And basically, one of the greatest is Dr. Hartman, who put together the HVP, the Heart and Values Profile, further investigated by Wayne Carpenter, who spent like 30, 40 years of their life working these things out in these patterns and behavior. So there's many different kinds. We could talk about that all day, but what happens is once we get that algorithm, the questions, basically all they do is ask you to identify descriptive words that are associated with one of the four behaviors or emotions, like anger, optimism, patience, and fear. So you'll see four words. It'll just say, are you more daring, which is an anger emotion? Or are you more fun, which is an optimistic emotion? Are you more patient, which is a patience emotion? And are you more reserved, which is a fear emotion? And if you look at that and say, I'm mostly angry and I'm less reserved, and you do that 24 times with different words that basically mean the same thing, I'm going to get a profile that says you're a dominant and a risk taker. It's that simple. But once you have those numbers, the secret sauce is the ability to read it.
Well, yeah, I want to get to that in a second because for example, once I did the questions, it's actually broken down into charts or graphs, right? So you had, for example, a political, you had altruistic, you had financial and all that. So let's kind of talk about those different categories.
Okay. The categories within that particular part of the profile, there's an aesthetic line, and this is from the drivers, or really it's a combination of values that create our worldview. There's an aesthetic line, which is all about creativity and harmony and things like that. There's an economic line, which is based upon bottom line thinking in our need to win or get something out of whatever we put something into. An individualistic line, which is all about standing out and being independent of everything and everyone else. There's a political line, which is all about, if I'm getting in the car, then I have to drive it. So it's all about control, authority, leadership, being able to predict your destiny and being a part of that. Altruism is all about doing for others at personal expense. Regulatory-driven mindsets are all about black and white thinking, following the rules, procedures, things of that sort. You become very strict and narrow in your thinking. I'm either or rather than both and. And then your theoretical driver is an excessive need to uncover, discover, and recover the facts. So people that are highly theoretically driven are always doing the data dump in the background, and why did he move that eyebrow, and whatever, and they're doing that, analytical thing. So when you take that and put it with the mad, glad, sad, and scared, if you get a very analytical thinker with a scared profile, you've got somebody with analysis paralysis.
But let's talk about this though, because there's two sections of the graph. If you're looking at, for everybody, just close your eyes and imagine this. You're looking at a page. I'll put this in the show notes on the page on ameerrosic.com once it comes out. But if you're looking at your graph, on the left-hand side, you have the natural side. So your natural abilities. Then you have the adaptive side. So talk about that. Why is the
Okay.
How do you get the information into the adaptive side? What differentiates the natural to the adaptive?
Okay. graph 2 is simply called the natural style. It's our natural, authentic self. In other words, in behavior, not values, which we just talked about, those 7 lines in values, but in behaviors, which are emotions, mad, glad, sad, scared, we have an ability to measure the intensity from 0 to 100 on how much that anger emotion is in play in a person's life. So the dominant line, or D in DISC. So where is that? Mine's 100. So some people it's 2. And so depending on where that is, we have a natural, authentic self, which is us seeking our own level like water does. Mm-hmm. But when we adapt, it's because our current circumstances or the environment we find ourselves in. So if you take this with the idea of work in mind, it will measure your behavior within the framework or the environment of work. So if you're a careless person and then you go to work and build bombs, okay, then your compliant line, the fear emotion, is going to rise on the adapted style because it must in order for you to perform well and live. And so that's why there's a natural and an adapted style. So if we look at a person, I could see how they're feeling at work in relationship to how they typically feel, and it will tell me there's a problem at work.
Is there like a red alarm when you see, like, for example, here's natural Ameer, then here's adapted Ameer, and they don't even go together whatsoever?
There can be alarms. Yes, there can be alarms. Listen, I looked at a group of 7 people 10 years ago. I never forgot this. And the individual that had this done, that owned the company, had known some of these people for 17 years. I never met them. I did the profile. I didn't talk to anybody. And then I got the owner on the phone, and he said, "What do you think?" I said, "I think John's going to quit in about 4 weeks." And he said, "Oh, my God." I said, "What?" He said, "I've known John for 17 years, and John just told me he's going to quit." Now, I did this another time. I was at my bank, and I walked in, and they all had gotten some profiles done through another organization, and the head of HR of the bank was there, and I was there chatting with the bank manager, and she introduced me to the head of HR, and at the same time, one of the employees walked in with a profile, and I said, "Could I look at that for a minute?" In front of the HR person, and I looked at a graph. I said, "When are you quitting?" She goes, "Oh my God, it's my last day Saturday."
Wow.
And I said, "Wow, that's great." And then she walked out of the room, and that HR person looked at me and then looked at the manager and said, "Have him do everybody in here." And I ended up getting $280 an hour 10 years ago to sit down with all these different people and go through their profiles. I ended up working with 3 marriages, all because of reading those numbers. But that's how powerful it can be if you really are good at reading it.
It is powerful because, like I said at the beginning, when I did mine with you, I was shocked how much you knew about me. Like every small, minute detail of who I am, you knew. You knew exactly my behavior, how I act, how I behave in public, how I behave behind closed doors, and what I should do. Because I asked you a really important question. I'm like, Steve, if you're in my place right now, you just finished a consultation with yourself, what would you do? And you're like, Ameer, you're like a freaking bazooka. You can do whatever you want to do because my natural, my adaptive, they're almost like identical if you lay them over, exactly the same. However, you're not really detail-oriented, like very specifically detail-oriented. So what you got to do is really surround yourself with people to point you in the right direction. And that's a game changer for me. They're like right there, that saved me about 10 years of my life, So right away I decided to figure out who can I get in my inner circle to really put me in place. Like, okay, Ameer, you got the energy, you can do anything you want, but don't do that. Go do that instead, right? So that's how powerful it is. And let's touch base a little bit on companies. Like, how can companies use behavioral analysis to really amplify their brand positioning and where they want to be in the next couple of years?
Well, I will typically I do what's called a real deep drill down with a company that really wants to know what do I have to do, what's going on, what is my culture, because your culture is actually not really driven by your mission statement. as much as it's driven by the personalities that drive the organization. So if you have a company that's very task-oriented and their mission statement is all about being touchy-feely, well, guess what? They're not touchy-feely at all. They don't even know how to be. It's an ideal they're wanting to live up to, but they'll never pull it off unless they hire some people that operate out of a sense of heart and mouth instead of head and hands like they do. And I'll bring that to their attention, and I'm like, this plaque you got on your wall, you'll never do that. So either you change the plaque or you change some of the people. So if that's important to you, which it might be, or it's just, oh, we're supposed to put plaques up, so we do. But either way, I'm going to get to the truth of where they are and then what it's going to take for them to get where they want to go and what kind of people it's going to take to pull it off. And so I'll measure what I call the 3 performance multipliers, which is critical thinking measurement, and then behavioral measurements, as you did, and the value measurement, as you did. I didn't do the critical thinking piece with you. But, those are the things I'll do, and it will tell me how they view the world around them, how clear they see it out of 5 levels of clarity, and how important it is to them out of 4 levels of importance. So if I value how my decision will affect a person around me, okay, but I don't see clearly those decisions, then I have a problem. So it's this type of thing that we're able to do to help an organization align themselves. I had a company down in Georgia several years ago that did this on all their people, and then they not only did this, they utilized it in a real powerful way. They arranged people based upon personality differences, behavioral differences. Some people, they realized, wow, this really affirms why I didn't think this person was working out. Therefore, they might have let them go, brought new people in through this process. They were up 40% in 1 year.
But the beautiful thing about this, in the actual page itself, the report you get, it actually shows you like different quadrants. Like you're this type of person, and you can mesh with these types of other people. So you can actually create that dream team inside of your company.
Yes, you can. Now, I'll tell you, it's rare that people will, for lack of a better term, rely on such mystical numbers for their organization. It's really hard for people to do, but once they start experiencing, I had a company in Florida I worked with. Now, I didn't know they were keeping data on this, but over a period of 3 years, I helped them hire 23% of their people. Wow. That's it. That's the only time they utilized me was 23% of the people. They hired their own people for the rest of the time. When they ended up looking at the data after a new CEO came into the organization and asked about what was this profiling they were doing, he asked for data, so they pulled it up. Come to find out, the people that they hired themselves, almost 80% of them were no longer with the organization. The people that I helped them hire, 74% were still there and doing fabulous. And he said, oh my God, where is this guy? Have him work with everybody that comes in here.
Yeah.
Because it's a proven fact that when Steve helps you identify the talent, he knows something we don't know. Yeah. Because people put forth the right foot in the interview, the best foot forward. 6 months later, after they're feeling really confident and content, here comes the left foot. But you see, what I do is I measure both feet before they get in the door.
But it's a win-win for everybody. For example, probably everyone can relate. At one point in your life, you've been working with people either in your own company or working for a company that you just don't get along with. So if there's a project at hand, it's almost like you're working upstream against a river. It's impossible. So why not find somebody that you're adaptable with?
That's right.
Why fight upstream where someone can come and say, or Steve comes to you, hey, you two, you guys are complete different energies. You guys need to be separated. That guy go over there, and I'm going to bring you somebody that you can vibe with. And time efficiency improves, mood improves, everything improves tenfold.
Yeah. And there are times when there are people that you need but you don't want.
Yes.
Because you just don't do those people well. And at that point, people have to learn, to get along. We don't have to go along in order to get along. So it's not like you have lunch with them every day, yeah. But there are certain behavioral styles that may be necessary for you to succeed quicker, more efficiently, whatever. And you have to understand that their behavioral dynamics are very necessary for product improvement or whatever it might be. and you have to learn to make that
It
adaptation.
reminds me of Kublai Khan. So one of the grandsons of Genghis Khan, when he took over China and made modern-day Beijing, his grandfather, Genghis Khan, tried to take it over by force and never really worked quite well. They did, but they really didn't have an empire. So what Kublai Khan did is kind of reminds me of what we're talking about, was he almost kind of was like a chameleon. He took their behaviors and found out what was the missing link to kind of communicate and connect with the regular people in China. So instead of using military might and power, he used politics and more of like, oh, I'm coming in, I'm saving you from your evil emperor, but this is what I'm giving you in return, and really connecting with the common man. And that's how within, I think, like 10 years, he literally took over all of China with that approach, with no military attacks.
Yeah, exactly. And there's many, many stories throughout history that are based upon that kind of personality type that you're talking about. St. Patrick basically told the Catholic Church to go pound sand and then did everything on personality, and people loved him. And he basically single-handedly completely converted an entire nation to what he believed. And we see this throughout history, that in the end, it's not what you do and what you say, it's how we do and say it that gets the attention of people. Aristotle talks about this in his book, Rhetoric. He says, in regards to speaking and hearing, or the audience and the presenter, if people believe you are a messenger of goodwill, number one, number two, you have their best interests at heart, and number three, you know what you're talking about, they'll buy into whatever you're talking about quicker and easier. And so cult leaders, people that get people to drink Kool-Aid and die, what is it about them that gets smart people to do things like this? It's temperament, and it's the behavioral strategies they formulate more by accident than even on purpose. They don't even know why they're good at it. Serial killers, they're behavioral profilers. They know who to, I've had many a time, I've had a female that I've been working with, and I say, listen, just for an FYI, you should be carrying mace. Because a certain person will see them coming a mile away just because of their behavioral style. So some people, they're like, remember the club, we put it on the steering wheel so no one steals the car? Some people's behavioral framework is like going up to a car and there's a club on the wheel. I'm not going to waste my time with that. I'm going to go to the convertible with the roof down and the keys in it, which is some other people's behavioral profile. And so once we understand what other people are seeing, we can make adaptations to safeguard, from awful people.
So when, for example, a company going through the process, let's kind of run through the whole framework over here. You'd get everyone in the company to do the behavioral profiling. And then
I'd start at the top and work my way down. So the owner or the CEO and then the executive team, they would go through it in an effort to understand how this is going to work throughout the organization. At that point, they're all in every time. And then we will do groups, teams within that organization, leaders. Sometimes we'll do 360s, which is the group identifying the traits of their leader along with the leader. So the leader says, I'm really great at this, and I give myself an A, but 26 people give him a D. That's always fun. Where's the blind spot here?
That's right.
This happens all the time. But once we look at it and we're honest about it, now this is hard because there are a lot of egos in leadership. Typically, ego-driven people are the ones who gain those roles because they're highly politically driven. Whereas sometimes the best people don't want it.
Yeah.
And then what you've got is you have title authority versus functional authority.
It reminds me of Martin Luther King. He never wanted to be a leader at all. He kept on saying, I don't want this role whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, you see, it's like King David in the Old Testament of the Bible. He's doing more by accident than King Saul's trying to do on purpose. And that's what happened with leaders like Martin Luther King and others. It's what I call accidental increase. In other words, their temperament strategies and their behavioral frameworks ahead of them. So this is why most people don't have to chase down their destinies. It'll chase them down if they let it.
Well, this kind of reminds me of the whole state of flow and the research from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. It's like once you really realize who you are and you just tap into that natural gifts you have, everything comes to you.
That's exactly right. I mean, people are spending a lot of time and energy trying to be like somebody they admire. And it's very prevalent. But if you embrace who you are by capitalizing on your strengths and embracing your weaknesses, like loving them, understanding them. It's like a car battery. You don't take the negative post off the car battery so it'll run better. It won't run at all. So it's a combination of our positives and negatives that make us unique and different and specific for a specific person, whatever. If I can point people to what that looks like and then what they can do about it, oh my God, the stories I could tell you of people where they'll call me up in tears and say, I debriefed with you yesterday. It was the worst, best day of my life.
Do you have any examples like you can share with us? You don't have to say names or companies or anything.
Yeah. I had a company I worked with up in Massachusetts several years back, maybe 5. And I went in there as a very high dominant leader. But, you know, he had some issues. And so I sat him down at the risk of being fired. Because I so wanted to help this person. And he got so angry with what I told him that he had no patience and yada, 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 and this is why this isn't working and so forth, that he got up and cussed me out and then slammed the door and left me in there in the office with his wife. And we just looked at each other. She looks at me and goes, what do we do now? And I said, well, I don't know. She said, let's go get lunch. So we did. Yeah. When we came back, I found him in the cafeteria of the organization with his head in his hands on the table, just a mess. I walked over, you know, was trying to be apologetic, and I said, listen, here's the deal. We talked. He broke down crying, of all things. Anyway, we worked through it. I charged them $5,000 for that, some other things I did that week. They wrote me a check for $10,000. And I said, what's the deal? They said, we wanted to pay you what you were worth. In other words, there's never been anybody that's ever told my husband the truth because his style was extremely intimidating, but it was nothing more than a front to protect the safe self. But I saw it instantly in the numbers. So there are many situations like that where people have, I had a guy, he tells me I saved him $1 million.
I believe
because I wish I had known that when I was writing my bill.
$1 million you saved.
Told me, you know, I did a guy that wasn't a partner. He was a very high profile employee. And I said, you know, you may want to talk to so-and-so. I think they're going to school on you. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, I think they're there learning everything they can learn. I said, because he's a closet entrepreneur. And he said, really? And I said, he goes, no. I said, well, why don't you ask him? I didn't ask the guy. I said, just ask him. Have a conversation. So we had a conversation. You know what the guy told him? Yeah, I am.
Wow.
That's exactly what I'm doing. And he was all set and getting ready to leave. It would have left him with a $12 million business with no one running it.
Wow.
And he called me up. It's true. What do I do? And I said, listen, you need to work out something where he feels he's got some equity in what you're doing if you want him to stay. So he come up with another concept, gave him equity in it. The guy's still there years later. And now he's one of my biggest salespeople. But it saved him an immense amount of trouble.
I have this question though, like, so once you get the actual numbers and the graphs and everything, is there any way you can actually change those figures, like in the future?
Well, it depends. Behavior is all modifiable. People modify their behavior overnight. If you come home and find your mate's cheating on you, your behavior is going to change instantly, and it might stay that way for a very long time. Your attitudes are going to change. So there are events and things that happen that can change that. Depending upon the intensity of the numbers, I never recommend somebody try to be somebody they aren't because it's something they want to do. I encourage you to be yourself, and if you can find something to do that incorporates who you are, you'll never work again. And that's my goal. Yes, you can make certain alterations, but you can't become somebody else.
No. I always tell people, don't look up to other people. You can take advice, you can use them as mentors. For example, Isaac Newton, he has a famous saying, standing on the shoulder of giants. However, he surpassed the giants. He just took ideas and philosophies from them and adapted his own storytelling about, mathematics and everything. However, be yourself. And you said something really important, that is, when you find that thing of yours, whatever that is, you're never going to work another day in your life.
Yeah.
Ever. Ever.
Yeah.
People always ask me, Ameer, why do I do what I do? Is like, man, if I was dirt poor and I had nothing in my life, I'll still be doing this.
Yeah. I feel the same way. I do what I am. I don't know if it's Sunday or Friday or Monday. I have to check. It's one of those things. I love what I do. And even though we go through times of adjustment, monetarily speaking, maybe because of companies holding back on personal performance or whatever because they're nervous about the economy, I've had those dips. I've never questioned what I do. I just take the time and write. I do spend time writing. But I never question what I'm supposed to do. And it's a niche fit. And 84% of everybody working in the States is waiting on their dream job.
Waiting.
And I always tell people, it's not going to pull up in your driveway.
Yeah.
You got to take some risks.
You have to take onus for your life. People think, I always say there's no magic fairy or bird that's going to fly around and just drop your dream destiny on your lap.
Right. Destinies are sought after and pursued. You have to grab your destiny by the neck. But there's another side to that as well. There are people that they're too ambitious about their destiny. Yeah. And because they're so aggressive at finding it, they outrun it. And you have to be careful that you really know who you are and what your purpose is here on the planet. And then once you can identify that, things are going to get a whole lot easier. So it's important to have self-understanding because it leads to self-management.
It's also
and then
important to
social understanding leads to relationship management.
Exactly. But it's also important to understand that there's no overnight success. I always hear from countless people, they're looking for this like black and white answer. What's the meaning or what's my purpose in life? How do I find passion? How do I find what to do? I'm like, there is no answer. I can't give you an answer for that. It's through osmosis. It's through understanding that your daily routines, your daily rituals will naturally unearth what you're supposed to do. Yeah,
a lot of what you have become and what I have become comes through who has influenced us. In other words, I only hang around people I want to be like. I hang around all kinds of people so I have the place in my life where I can help. But I only spend inordinate amounts of time around the people I want to be like. I see something in their life, some area of smarts or intuition or something, and that DNA rubs off on you. And so I really am a product of the people I've spent a lot of time with. Even when I was in 20 years of age, dating my wife, we double dated with 50-year-olds because I wanted my kids to be like their kids. I wanted to raise kids like they did. I wanted a job like they had or whatever. And I would pick their brain. I would talk to them. I would watch them. I was people watching from a very young age. So part of who we are is a mixture of who we've been around.
And so it goes back to
allowed to influence us.
Mirror neurons.
Yeah.
Monkey see, monkey do, and that's how we evolved as a human species. And that's why funny you actually bring this up. I'm releasing a big article not too long from now here, is being really picky about who you spend time with. Sean Stephenson, he wrote the book. He's a 3-foot giant, 4-foot giant. He wrote the book Get Off Your Butt. Great book. And he categorizes friends in like A friends, B friends, C friends. And he's like, think about it. He's like, you always see the same people hang around certain individuals. C friends, they may be complaining, oh, the government's screwing us. Oh, I don't have enough money. Oh, this and that. They're always pointing fingers. And then there's that old Greek saying, if you point one finger, 3 are pointing back at you. Mm-hmm. Then you get the B friends who aren't really quite there, but you see they're almost there. And I always love the analogy, you never give a man a fish, you always give him a fishing rod to teach him how to fish.
Yeah.
Right? So you spend a certain amount of time, then you got the A friends. Yeah. Which, you're reading the same materials, you got the same philosophies, almost same spirituality, same mindset. You guys know exactly what you're meant to do and how to do it.
Yeah. Well, I use the analogy of a barrel of monkeys, and I don't know if you ever played the game, but when I was a kid, you could get this little barrel, and it had in there a bunch of monkeys, and one arm was up hooked this way, and the other arm hooked that way, and you pick them up. I always am hooked to somebody above me that I'm aspiring to be like, and I'm hooked to somebody below me that I'm helping be like.
Yes.
And if you have both hooks engaged all the time, you can't lose, because you're working benevolently, you're assisting others, you're helping others. You have to have that piece for, I think, full satisfaction in your life. And then you've got to have something you're reaching for, you're putting energy towards, that you want to become like. But at the same time, capturing bits and pieces of each dynamic. There have been people that basically, I hired a guy years ago. He worked with me for 3 years, and the whole time I worked with him, it was me assisting him in life issues and what have you. But then the most interesting thing happened. When I was at my darkest hour, when I was around him, that's the person I ended up going to. And they helped me. And I didn't go to the person I admired. I went to the person that knew me the closest, knew me well, that I trusted. And they had such wonderful advice and everything they had, and they loved me for who I was, not for who they thought I should be, and vice versa. It was amazing. And so you'll be surprised at where things come from in your friend network. You just got to make sure, whether it's up there or down there, they're the ones you want to be attached to.
Show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, I think we'll leave it out there. Thank you so much, Steve, for coming on and really educating us on this behavioral analysis. If someone's interested in actually acquiring your services and going through the process, how can they reach you?
The best way is to go to stevesisler.org, STEVESISLER. And, there's buttons everywhere that say, I want to know more, whatever. You click that, you fill out a form, it'll come to me, and we can do an introduction. You can book a 15-minute free intro through my booking service, which is all online. And we can have a chat, see if it's something that'll fit what you want to do.
Cool. Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming on the Ameer Rosic Show. Have an amazing day, bro.
Thanks. You too.
Bye. Hey, guys, I really hope you enjoyed today's podcast with Steve. For more podcasts like this, please head over to ameerrosic.com and click on the podcast link on the top. And remember, you always got to win at life. Catch you next week.